I always thought my marriage was strong. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd walk into my own home one afternoon and watch my entire life collapse in front of me. I remember that day so clearly it still makes my chest tighten just thinking about it. I was supposed to be at work all day, but my boss let us leave early after a meeting ended sooner than expected. I thought it was a perfect chance to surprise my wife with her favorite takeout lunch. I even stopped by her favorite cafe to grab her usual iced coffee. As I walked up to our house, humming along to the radio, I had no idea my world was about to explode. When I stepped inside, everything felt off. The TV was off, and I couldn't hear her working in the home office like she usually did. I called out her name, thinking she might be upstairs, and that's when I heard it, muffled noises coming from our bedroom. At first I froze. I stood there, gripping the iced coffee cup so tightly it nearly cracked. My heart was pounding so hard in my ears I could barely hear anything else. I don't even know what pushed me to walk up the stairs. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe some part of me already knew what was happening before I saw it with my own eyes. I opened our bedroom door, and there they were, my wife and a man I recognized instantly. It was her best friend's fiancé, David. The same guy who used to come over with her best friend, Emma, during game nights. The same guy who asked me for advice when he was planning to propose to Emma. And here he was, tangled up with my wife like they didn't have a care in the world. For a few seconds, no one moved. My wife's eyes went wide, and David scrambled away from her, stuttering my name, but I couldn't hear him. Everything felt like a bad dream that I just couldn't wake up from. I wish I could say I screamed or yelled or broke something, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at them, feeling my entire body go numb. I slowly put the coffee cup down on the table by the door and turned around without a word. I could hear my wife calling my name, but I kept walking down the stairs, out the front door, and back into my car. I didn't even know where to go. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, feeling this anger and betrayal burn through my chest so fiercely that I thought it might kill me. But the thing is, as painful as that moment was, it was only the beginning. Because what they didn't know was that Emma had been like a sister to me, and I couldn't let her marry a man like David. They ruined my life, so I decided to ruin their wedding. And when I tell you what happened next, you'll understand exactly why my wife never expected that walking out on her would be the smallest part of my revenge. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at nothing while my mind replayed what I had just seen. The betrayal felt like a heavy blanket pressing down on my chest. I kept thinking about how my wife used to tell me David was like a brother to her. Every time Emma and David came over, my wife would laugh and joke with him like there was nothing between them. Now I realized that behind all those friendly smiles was a disgusting secret they were keeping from us. I drove away eventually, ending up at a small park where I often went to clear my head. I sat on a bench under the shade of an old tree, trying to calm down, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My phone kept buzzing with my wife's calls, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't know what I would say. All I could think about was Emma. She was probably at work, planning her wedding, trusting David completely. I imagined her sitting at her office desk, excitedly scrolling through flower arrangements and catering menus, not knowing the man she loved was with my wife just hours ago. I thought back to the first time I met David. It was at Emma's birthday dinner 3 years ago. He was so polite, shaking my hand firmly, complimenting my wife's cooking, asking me about my job. He seemed genuine. And when he proposed to Emma at that same restaurant a year later, my wife cried tears of joy, hugging them both so tightly. Now, knowing what I know, every memory feels poisoned. I couldn't understand how my wife could do this to me. We had been together for 6 years. We built a life together. I supported her through her career changes, her health struggles, her fights with her family. I thought we were a team. But I guess I was just someone she settled for until someone else caught her attention. And that someone else was the fiancé of her best friend. The guilt didn't even seem to bother her. How long had this been happening behind my back? That night I didn't go home. I booked a cheap hotel room on the edge of town. As I lay on the stiff mattress staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't just sit back and let this destroy me. I wasn't going to be the only one suffering. Emma deserved to know the truth, no matter how much it would hurt her. David was about to marry her, pretending he loved her while sleeping with someone else. I couldn't let that happen. I stayed up all night thinking about what to do. I wanted to scream at my wife, confront David, and tell Emma everything immediately. But then I thought, why not let them think they got away with it? Why not let them plan their perfect wedding while thinking their secret was safe? Why not wait until everyone was there to watch their happy ending crash down in front of them? The thought brought me a small sense of peace. They thought they broke me, but they had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up feeling empty but determined. I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls and messages from my wife. Some were just her calling my name, some were apologizing, and some were angry, asking why I left without talking. I ignored them all. Instead, I scrolled through Emma's social media. She had posted a photo of her and David at a wedding cake tasting. Her smile was so bright it made my chest hurt. She had no idea what he was doing behind her back. She was talking about how excited she was for the big day, how grateful she felt to have such a loving fiancé. Reading her words made my anger boil over. David was living two lives, and he didn't even seem guilty about it. I decided to take the day off work. I called my boss and said I had a family emergency. He sounded concerned but didn't ask questions. I spent the day thinking through every detail. I knew if I confronted my wife now, she would cry and beg and make excuses. She'd probably blame me somehow, say I wasn't attentive enough or that I worked too much. And David would lie to Emma, tell her I was just making things up to hurt him. I needed undeniable proof. Something that would crush their lies in front of everyone. I went back home that evening when I was sure my wife was at her yoga class. The house felt cold and empty. I walked into our bedroom, staring at the bed where they betrayed me. The smell of her perfume still hung in the air. I felt sick to my stomach but forced myself to stay focused. I checked her laptop, hoping she might have left some messages open, but it was locked. Her phone was nowhere to be seen. Then I remembered the small security camera I installed months ago when we were worried about package theft. I logged into the app on my phone and checked the indoor footage. My hands were shaking as I scrolled back to the day before. And there it was. Clear as daylight. My wife leading David upstairs, laughing softly before they disappeared into the bedroom. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to keep watching, making sure the video saved to my phone. It wasn't just about catching them anymore. It was about exposing them for who they truly were. That night I sat in my car again, parked near Emma's apartment building. I watched as her lights went off around midnight. I wondered if she was lying in bed thinking about her wedding dress or the vows she was planning to write. My chest tightened with guilt because I knew the truth I held in my phone was about to destroy her. But deep down, I also knew she deserved better than a man like David. Just like I deserved better than a woman who would throw away our marriage for a few moments of lust. I drove away before I did something reckless, but as I headed back to the hotel, I couldn't stop thinking about what I was about to do. Their wedding was only 2 weeks away. The thought of standing there, watching them smile at each other, made my blood boil. I knew exactly when and where I would reveal the truth. And when I did, their perfect world would come crashing down so hard they'd never recover. The next 2 weeks felt like the longest days of my life. Every morning, I woke up with a tightness in my chest, thinking about what I had to do. My wife kept texting me, begging me to come home and talk. She even messaged my sister, asking her to convince me to come back. But I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. At work, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled at my coworkers, joined meetings, and finished my tasks, but inside, I was shaking with anger and heartbreak. Meanwhile, Emma kept posting updates about her wedding. She shared photos of her final dress fitting, her bridal shower, her hair and makeup trials. Each photo showed her glowing with happiness. It broke my heart to know what was waiting for her, but it also made me feel even more sure of what I had to do. She was so excited about her future with David, and I couldn't let her walk into a marriage built on lies. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the hotel ceiling, replaying everything over and over. The moment I walked into my bedroom and saw them. The way David had looked at me, terrified, like a coward. The way my wife's voice had cracked as she called my name. I thought about Emma, about how her life was about to shatter the same way mine did. I wondered if she would hate me for telling her the truth. But I knew that keeping quiet would make me just as bad as David. On the morning of the wedding, I dressed in my best suit. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. My eyes looked tired, and my face seemed older than it was just 2 weeks ago. I grabbed my phone, checking that the video was saved and ready. My hands felt cold as I drove to the venue. It was a beautiful garden by a lake, decorated with white roses and gold ribbons. Guests were arriving, chatting happily, taking photos by the floral arch. I saw my wife standing among the guests, wearing a blush pink dress. Her hair was curled softly around her shoulders, and she looked beautiful, but all I felt was anger. She spotted me and her face fell. She started walking towards me, but I turned away, pretending not to see her. Today wasn't about her. It was about Emma. The ceremony area was filling up quickly. I saw David standing with his groomsmen, fixing his tie and laughing. He looked so calm, like he wasn't hiding the ugliest secret of all. Emma appeared a few minutes later, wearing her wedding gown. She looked like a dream, her veil flowing softly behind her as she walked around greeting family members. My chest tightened painfully at the sight of her. She was about to say vows to a man who betrayed her in the worst way possible. As I took my seat in the back row, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I clenched my fists to keep myself from shaking. The officiant called everyone to sit down, and the music started playing. Emma stood at the end of the aisle, holding her bouquet with trembling hands, tears of happiness in her eyes. David turned to face her with a wide smile. No one knew what was about to happen. But I did. And in just a few minutes, their world would change forever. The music continued playing softly as Emma began walking down the aisle, her father holding her arm, both of them smiling with tears in their eyes. Guests turned to watch her, whispering about how beautiful she looked. I felt my chest tighten even more. My hands were sweating as I gripped my phone, feeling its weight in my pocket like it was burning through the fabric. I knew what I had to do. I waited, counting each step she took towards David. The officiant welcomed everyone and began the ceremony with blessings for their future together. My heart was racing so hard I felt lightheaded. Then, just as the officiant asked if anyone had any reason why these two should not be married, I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk down the aisle. Gasps filled the garden as people turned to look at me. David's smile faded instantly. His eyes widened in panic, and he shook his head slightly, silently begging me not to say anything. Emma frowned, confused, looking between him and me. My wife, standing near the front row, covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with shock. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. "I'm sorry for interrupting," I said, my voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. "But before this wedding continues, Emma deserves to know the truth about the man she's marrying." David stepped forward quickly, his face pale. "Don't do this," he hissed under his breath. Emma turned to him, her eyebrows furrowed. "What is he talking about, David?" she asked softly, her voice shaking. Before he could answer, I played the video. The sounds of my wife and David laughing together filled the silent garden. The guests gasped. Emma's father's face turned bright red with anger, and her mother started crying. Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she watched the betrayal unfold in front of everyone. But before anyone could react further, my wife stepped forward. Her face was streaked with tears, and she suddenly screamed, "Stop! All of you, stop!" Everyone turned to her, stunned. She pointed at Emma with shaking hands. You think your fiancé is the only one with secrets? You're not so innocent either. The entire garden fell silent again as Emma turned to my wife, her mouth trembling. What are you saying? Emma asked in a broken voice. My wife let out a bitter laugh. Ask her who she's been texting every night for months. Ask her why she kept leaving dinner early when you were at our house. She turned to me with eyes filled with rage and pain. You think you're the only one betrayed? Emma and I, we weren't just best friends. We were more than that. She never loved David the way she loved me. The words echoed through the shocked silence. David's face twisted with confusion and horror. Emma shook her head, crying uncontrollably as she stepped back from everyone. Guests whispered among themselves, some covering their mouths in disbelief. I felt like the ground was slipping away under my feet. This wasn't what I planned. I wanted to expose David, but now everything was spiraling out of control. The betrayal went deeper than I ever imagined, and suddenly it wasn't just about me exposing their secret. Now, none of us knew where the truth ended and the lies began. For a few seconds, no one moved. Emma was crying so hard she could barely stand, and David just stared at her, his face pale and blank, like his mind couldn't process what he had just heard. My wife stood there, breathing heavily, wiping tears from her face as everyone whispered around us. The officiant quietly stepped away, clearly realizing the wedding was over. Emma shook her head, looking between my wife and David, her hands trembling. Is this true? She whispered to my wife, her voice so broken it made my chest ache despite everything. My wife nodded slowly, tears falling down her cheeks. I loved you, she said in a cracked voice. I always loved you, but you chose him. And I couldn't just wait around for you anymore. Emma collapsed onto a chair, sobbing into her hands. David stepped forward, his face red with anger. So what was I then? Just someone you used to hide your secrets? He yelled, his voice shaking. My wife didn't answer. She just stood there, defeated, staring at Emma with so much pain in her eyes. I felt so many emotions rush through me at once: anger, sadness, confusion, and a strange relief. I had spent weeks planning to ruin David and my wife, but I never imagined the truth was so twisted. Guests began leaving quietly, some glaring at David, some shaking their heads at my wife and Emma. Emma's parents stood by her side, comforting her as she cried harder with each passing second. David finally turned to me, his eyes filled with hate. Are you happy now? He spat. I looked at him calmly, feeling strangely empty. I didn't do this to make myself happy, I said quietly. I did it because the truth always comes out, no matter how much you try to hide it. Just as I turned to leave, thinking everything was finally over, Emma suddenly stood up. Her eyes were swollen and red, but there was a strange calmness in her voice. Wait, she said, wiping her tears away. Everyone stopped and looked at her. She turned to David, then to my wife, and finally to me. All this time, all these secrets, but none of you know mine. I frowned, confused, as she pulled out her phone and opened her photos. She held it up, showing us a picture of a sonogram. I'm pregnant, she said softly, tears streaming down her face again. And it's not David's. David stumbled back like he had been punched, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to speak. My wife covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God!" under her breath. I stared at Emma in shock, feeling the air around us turn so heavy it was hard to breathe. The entire garden fell silent as her words echoed around us. No one saw that coming. Not even me. And in that moment I realized that in the end, none of us really knew the people we loved. For a long moment, no one said anything. The guests who were still there stood frozen, staring at Emma as she clutched her phone against her chest. Her tears kept falling, but her face looked strangely calm, like she had accepted everything that had just happened. David stepped forward, shaking his head, his eyes wide with disbelief. What do you mean it's not mine? He asked, his voice breaking. Emma looked at him with tired eyes. I found out last month, she whispered. I didn't tell you because I knew something was wrong with us. I knew you didn't really love me. My wife just stood there, staring at Emma with tears rolling down her cheeks. She didn't even try to speak. It was like her body had given up fighting. I looked at Emma, feeling a deep sadness for her. I had spent weeks planning to expose David, but in the end, she was already carrying her own pain, hidden away from everyone. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to her. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I never wanted to hurt you. I just thought you deserved the truth before marrying someone like him. Emma gave me a small, tired smile. Thank you, she said softly. You did the right thing. She turned to her parents and told them she wanted to leave. They wrapped their arms around her and guided her away from the ceremony area. David just stood there, staring at the ground with empty eyes, while his friends quietly gathered around him, unsure of what to say. My wife looked at me, her face full of regret. Please, she whispered. Can we talk? But I shook my head. There was nothing left to say between us. I walked away, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. I had spent so long feeling broken, angry, and betrayed, but now it felt like I could finally breathe again. The truth was out. Their lies were exposed. And while it didn't erase my pain, it gave me the strength to move on. A few weeks later, I filed for divorce. My wife didn't fight it. She quietly signed the papers, tears falling on each page she signed. Emma reached out to me once, thanking me again for being brave enough to show her the truth. She told me she planned to raise her baby on her own and focus on healing before letting anyone else into her life. I told her I respected that, and I hoped she'd find true peace and love one day. David moved out of town soon after. No one heard from him again. My wife stayed in the city, trying to rebuild her life without me. And as for me, I decided to travel for a while, just to clear my mind and remind myself that there was still good in the world despite what happened. In the end, I realized something important. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But the truth, no matter how painful it is, will always set us free. And as I watched the sunrise on a quiet morning a month later, I finally felt like I could start over. I was no longer the man who walked in on betrayal. I was the man who survived it and found his strength again.